this is Lisa from the Painted Pineapple, and I would like to talk to you guys about choosing the right brush for your project. A lot of people come into the shop and the first thing they'll ask is, I have no idea what brush I need. There's so many to choose from, so many sizes, types of bristles, different shapes, so I'm here to break it down for you and hopefully make it a little bit easier. So first thing to consider is the size of your piece. So if you're working with something really small and leggy, you're not going to want to go in with a brush like this. So brushes I like to consider to be tools. So tools, much like in your kitchen, if you want to equate it to knives, you wouldn't use a serrated bread knife to peel a potato. It just wouldn't be very effective, and you might actually hurt yourself. No reason to be afraid with the paintbrush selection. Also, you wouldn't use a paring knife to actually cut a big loaf of bread. So you really do need to consider the size of the piece you're working on and what brush is going to effectively give the look you want. So there are different sizes, different shapes of brushes as well. So for instance, if you choose a brush like this, which a lot of people will ask, just give me a medium-sized brush and it should do all of my projects. Well, this is why it might not be the best choice. So if you go with something like this, which is a round, nice mid-sized brush, and you actually put it in your paint and you begin painting, you can see that there's going to be far too much paint on this brush to deposit. There's not enough surface for all of the paint. So you're going to end up with too much paint application. That typically leads to brush strokes showing. You can end up missing out and filling in fine details on your project because the paint is just laying in there, and you're not able to really get in and highlight the piece as nicely as you would if you were to go in with a smaller brush. So something even this size, which would be half the size, would be a much more effective size to use. I personally like to use even something smaller like this when I'm working on little pieces. I'll typically work sometimes with 2 or 3 different brushes on a project, depending on the surface I'm working on. Obviously, this surface is going to require a different size brush than this little leg will. So it's good to have 2 or 3 at the ready so that you can just take the one you need to go in and do those little details. So this one is just a little artist brush, actually. It's a 3/4 inch wash, and I use this on almost every project, even just to get into tiny little cutting edges. So the shape is really important. Like I say, you might be painting a piece that is square, and you'll want to go in with a square brush, something like this or like this, and they come in lots of different sizes. For flats, the other thing you can do too is use a roller if you're working on a really flat and linear surface. You could decide to use a microfiber or felt roller. A high quality one will be really nice to lay down the paint. And if you're looking for a super flawless finish, you could even go in and roll. So start by rolling your piece. And once you've applied the paint really nicely and evenly all over, you've got to work fairly quickly because you don't want it drying out. You can take a large or very soft synthetic brush and go behind and actually lay that paint down, and that'll give you a really nice fine finish as well. So there's different shapes, different sizes. So in shapes even, between the round and the squares and the angled, we've even got some that have little pointy tips on them. These are really effective if you're working on kitchen doors or something with a lot of bevels and raised edges. So you can actually work in combination with one of these and a roller. So you could go in to your bevel, and that really lays the paint in there nicely. It doesn't deposit too much, so your corners don't get all filled in with paint. It actually scoops the paint out with that little fine tip, and then you could go ahead and use your roller, or you could go ahead and use your flat brush to fill in these areas. So you really should consider the size of the piece and the shape of the piece that you're painting. If you're working on something with really nice curvaceous legs, maybe it's a bow front chest, the round brushes actually do work quite nicely because they're tapered just a little bit on the end and they hold a lot of paint, so you don't have to keep going back into your container and dipping into the paint. It'll actually hold it very nicely so that you can spread it out, which creates a really nice soft look. If you have to keep going back into your container, your paint is over here drying out. So once you go back into drying out paint and you start to try and rework it, that's when you introduce texture. So that's the next thing to consider, is whether you want texture or not in your piece. So that'll actually affect the brush or the bristle choice. So there's different bristles. There's a natural fiber bristle like this. So the natural bristles will, with certain paints especially, give you a little bit more of that hand painted look, maybe more of a farmhouse or textural kind of piece. These work fantastic for that. They do work very, very well also with chalk-based paints. I wouldn't use them with an acrylic paint unless you were going to be wanting that very textured, like I say, kind of farmhouse hand-painted feel to your work. We sell a lot of synthetic brushes in the shop, and that is what we recommend for a very fine finish. And there's actually different grades or qualities of synthetic bristles. And what you're going to be looking for when choosing a synthetic brush, based on the desired outcome you want, is how fine that bristle is. So if you're working with a really super thin filament on the fiber, so you can even see, these are both extremely good quality brushes, but you can see there's almost a difference. So the one here that I'm touching with the green string, a very superior brush, but you can see even how this one has just a little bit finer, silkier filaments. This is going to leave a virtually streak or brushstroke free finish. Another way to help you if that's the look you're going for is when I mentioned too, rolling and then going in and laying off with a very fine synthetic brush. This will also help you achieve that very flawless look. So those are some things to consider. So size of your piece, shape of your piece, bristle type, and paint type. So if you're going to be doing chalk paint or milk paint, which is a powder-based paint that you mix with water, either of these work fabulously well with a natural bristle brush. If you want to use a synthetic brush with your chalk paint, you may consider watering your paint down just a little bit, because these are so flexible and pliable that it just may not be strong enough to push the paint straight out of the jar. If you want to come right out of the jar of Annie Sloan, best to absolutely use an Annie Sloan chalk paint brush, which is natural bristle. Hope I haven't lost you guys. So natural bristle, synthetic bristle, microfiber roller. Little tips to help you as well along the way for success are to dampen your bristles first. So especially if you're working with, let's say, a fusion mineral paint, which is an all-in-one paint, it's an acrylic. So acrylics will hold their texture. They are self-leveling, but you do want to make sure you're using a quality soft bristle. And if you actually dampen that bristle, it will really help you as well. So you can either run the bristles under your tap, and you can kind of, flick off the water, or take a cloth and absorb, just really get all the water out of it. Or you could even go in with a mister and just kind of give your brush a light mist. It doesn't need to be, or it shouldn't be, saturated with water, just slightly damp, and you'll notice a big difference in paint application. You won't feel a drag, so when you do lay it down, it'll be just one nice smooth pass that you'll get. Another thing too that will help you is when you grab onto your paintbrush, you want to actually grab it by the neck. A lot of people will want to hold their brushes up like this, like they're writing with them. When in effect, that's going to create fatigue, and also you don't have much control. So you want to work with your hands, your fingers, right around the ferrule, and you're going to work with your arm when you're painting. So you'll be able to control your brush stroke much better, and you won't get cramps in your hands. And then, since you've invested in such a beautiful brush, you're going to want to keep it looking fantastic and working fantastic for you for years to come. And they absolutely will if you take care of them properly. So working with them damp, washing them. So if you're working on a larger project and you start to see your bristles start to kind of splay apart a little bit, that's when you know that it's time to go and rinse your brush out. So go and rinse it out. You don't have to get all of the paint out of it. Just rehydrate it a little bit, kind of squeegee it out a little, stamp it out, and then go back into your paint and start working. And that'll also help keep your brush living for a very long time. If you have to step away from your project and you don't have time to wash your brush out, this is something that we do all the time, is keep a little jar next to us. So if you just have that little jar, keep it next to you, and as you're painting, pop your brush in there. It's going to be much happier in some water than sitting on the counter with acrylic paint drying in it. So those are a couple of tips. And to really keep the bristles soft and supple for a very long time, you can use any soap you want really for daily washing, but to really keep the bristles happy and moisturized, you're going to want to use a good quality brush soap, brush cleaner. So this actually is a Fusion one that we carry in the shop. It's really lovely because it's made from linseed oil. It really is luxurious, and it can even save some brushes when they start to feel a little bit crusty. You can revive them with this. So we've just talked about how one brush doesn't fit all when selecting brushes to paint with. Now I'd like to talk to you about brushes for top coats and primers. What we really don't want you to do is take your beautiful brush that you may have spent upwards of $40 on and dip it into something like a shellac-based bin sealer. These are okay to use with your water-based products, so any types of the finishes we carry in store, so the general finishes, water-based, the Fusion Tough Coat, and the Annie Sloan lacquers are all water-based products. You can use your better brushes with those, or you can even go in with a roller to apply those with. If you're doing something like hemp oil, you can apply that with just something very inexpensive, like a little chip brush. Again, you wouldn't want to be going back into your very expensive Stahlmeister to go in with hemp oil. Just keep that for your water-based products. This one you can use for oil. Also, if you're applying waxes, you may want to consider you can use your natural bristle brush. If you've painted with it, you can still use it for wax. You'll just want to make sure that you clean it out very well with a mineral spirit or odorless solvent, and then soap before painting with it. But traditionally, it's great if you can keep one brush dedicated to your wax. Those are natural bristle. They really move the wax around much better than a synthetic would. Last but not least, when you're working with something like a bin or an oil-based primer, this one's actually a shellac base, so you actually need a special product like a methyl hydrate or a denatured alcohol to clean out your brushes. So we would recommend you use something that's still somewhat soft, but definitely not a top quality brush. Something that will actually apply it fine. You can even use rollers, work very, very well with bin as well, and then you can just toss them when they're finished. So absolutely choose your brush for the project and the intended purpose, the material, the size, shape, and all of the other variables that you may want to consider.